The legend returns. That has been the buzzword for Hero MotoCorp for the last 2 months, stirring up a lot of memories of the original Karizma and then leading up to the launch of this, the 4th generation Karizma, now known as the XMR. Now these memories that I speak of, they are a bit of a mixed bag. Because you see, when the original Karizma came out, it stirred up quite a bit of storm. No pun intended. But it also showed Hero in a very new light. The manufacturer of the typical fill it, shut it, forget it motorcycles had not only entered but also pushed the boundaries of performance bikes from an Indian manufacturer's standpoint. That was big news. The original Karizma was truly a legend then. In fact, I had the pride of even owning one of those. But then the Karizmas that followed, the ZMR and Eric Buell's version of that tall sports tourer, didn't really cut it for me. I wouldn't even touch those motorcycles with a 10-foot pole.
They looked hideous, to say the least. And the only saving grace was the upright stance and the torquey and smooth engine that was carried over from the original. But today, if you want an upright touring motorcycle, you're better off choosing an adventure bike instead of a sports tourer, given the wider scope that it offers.
So what about the new one then? What about the XMR? Is it really a legend, or is it just another full-fed motorcycle from Hero that just wears the Karizma badge? Let's find out. The original Karizma was a tall boy, but it never looked lanky. If anything, it looked imposing. That big instrumentation with a 3-pot layout, the broad tank, broad seat, really handsome looking and sharp tail section, and that large exhaust canister. All of that came together to give that Karizma that big bike feel. 20 years from then though, motorcycles now like to look lean, just like the riders that are riding them. And in that stance, or in that point of view, this motorcycle looks a little too sleek, almost as sleek as the Extreme 200. I would have liked a bit more muscle, a bit more imposing stance, especially for a sports tourer. I would have liked it to have a more bulky or a more muscular stance, which unfortunately it doesn't get. What it gets, however, is a very sharp, sporty stance, something that will feel just at home even on a racetrack.
And that is precisely what today's audience is looking for, more than a sports tourer. And the success of the Yamaha R15, the KTM RC200, Gixxer 250 SF, or even the Apache RR310 is testimony to that fact. These are also motorcycles that the new Karizma will go after. Despite the compact dimensions though, the XMR tips the scales at a little over 160 kilos, which is a bit heavier than the older Karizmas.
However, out on the road, out on the move, it doesn't feel heavy at all. It's very nimble, very easy to maneuver. So compared to the previous Karizma, which felt big and it felt a little bulky, this one feels nice and compact. It feels a lot sportier. Of course, that stance is still a little bit on that sport touring side, which means that despite the clip-ons, despite that absolutely sharp nose, it still isn't a very committed riding posture. It's still a pretty relaxed riding posture. So long distance comfort shouldn't be a problem. Long distance comfort of the seat, I don't know yet because I've not really taken it that far. However, for the city, it feels quite nice. It's a narrow seat. So despite that 810mm seat height, which is again on par with the original Karizma, it doesn't feel too tall. You can easily get 2 feet flat on the ground. So managing this motorcycle in tight parking spaces, on the move, and in terms of the overall comfort as well, I think it's pretty good.
Think of the XMR to be a smaller alternative to the Apache RR310 then. Similar riding posture, more performance than the R15 of course, and well, a similar shade of red as well. The yellow looks better in my opinion though. And while the paint quality is good, there are a few inconsistent panel gaps, and you're going to have a hard time keeping the dark visor devoid of any swirl marks.
Another USP for the motorcycle is an adjustable visor height. So all you need to do is press this button right here. No, it's not electronically controlled. That was a confusion in our walk-around review as well. You press this down and then you just pull this up. So this is the level of adjustability that you get. Now, honestly, I don't think it's going to make much of a difference. Even at its tallest position, it's probably just going to reduce a little bit of buffeting, but that's about it. It's not really going to give you a lot of weather protection. So from a touring standpoint, I'm not sure how much this is going to help. But like I talked about the long distance comfort, this is something that I'll reserve for a road test and a long distance road trip.
Adjustable visor can come in handy when ducking and riding in a sporty manner though. But because the button needs a firm push before you adjust the visor and the operation needs both hands, you ideally shouldn't do it on the move. The headlight of the XMR features two projector lamps which come on automatically when the surroundings go dark. That is a big plus. The overall assembly though looks like it came straight out of the Hero Zoom. The tail light is mounted high and looks sporty and appears like a high-resolution version of the Passion Pro's tail light. But with such design elements, the XMR tries to establish a familial connection with the rest of the Hero lineup. It is Hero's best attempt yet at a full-fed bike, and it does have plenty of street presence that sets it apart from its rivals.
This panel right here is an ode to the original Karizma. If you remember, the previous Karizma had a similar panel right below the colored body panel, and it mimicked the look of a perimeter frame. So they've sort of carried that over here. But speaking of the frame, this one gets a steel trellis frame. It's got a nice rigid feel to it. It feels a lot more stable when you're attacking corners. Even high-speed lane changes feel quite nice on this motorcycle. The stability overall is quite good. Complementing that is a broad set of tires as well. You get a 140 at the rear, and these are 17 inches of course. So even that is well taken care of. But speaking of body panels, there's quite a bit of creaking that I'm getting from a lot of panels. Now, build quality was never really great for the bodywork, even on the previous Karizma. The rear panels especially kept on going loose. The tail light kept on going loose from its mounting. This one may not do all of that. Hero's definitely improved quite a bit in those last 20 years, but there's still quite a bit of creaking coming off these panels.
Out of the box, the XMR takes on bends quite well. But for sportier riding, I would definitely swap those MRF zappers for stickier rubber. And the 17-inch wheel diameter opens up a lot of options.
The trade-off for this aggressive riding posture of the motorcycle is the suspension travel. It doesn't feel as soft or as squishy as the original Karizma, which is not a bad thing because the overall ride quality is actually quite good. It's a bit on the firmer side, like I said, not as soft as the original Karizma, but at the same time that has its advantages in the way the motorcycle handles around bends. Now, the previous Karizma, we remember, the front end feel was always lacking. It would have a lot of nosedive under braking. If you went a little too hot into the turn, there would be a lot of movement from the chassis, from the overall motorcycle. All of that is nicely ironed out with this bike. So like I said, even on the racetrack, it might just feel at home. It's not going to be as sharp a handler as something like the KTM RC or even the R15 for that matter. But you should be able to have good fun. So if you decide to ride from your home all the way to the track, tour all the way to the 2.5 racetracks in the country, you'll still have fun doing that. And out on the racetrack also, you should be able to have some fun.
The low-speed ride over poor road conditions feels a bit unsettling, but the suspension feels more supple as the speeds rise. There is no traction control like some of its rivals, but even on the dusty and some of the wet roads in Delhi, I never felt the need for it. But more safety features are always welcome.
You get dual channel ABS on the motorcycle, which is good news. However, the brake lever feel, it's a bit spongy.
They are still far more confident than the 20-year-old Karizma, but do need a firm braking effort. The engine is lower in capacity than the older Karizmas, but it's technically superior with its 4-valve DOHC specification. It also has liquid cooling, which works just as intended in some of the traffic jams of Delhi that I was stuck in after our shoot was over. The exposed frame doesn't heat up too much either, and the overall ventilation for the fairing is well designed.
Now, in terms of the power and torque output, Hero claims that it is the best in class. Take that with a pinch of salt, because if you're comparing it to something like the Pulsar NS, Pulsar RS, etc., then yes, it is better than those two motorcycles. But then again, the 250s, like the Gixxer 250 SF for example, it's not too far apart on the price bracket, right? So they're delivering better power and torque. So like I said, take that with a pinch of salt. However, in the real world, now I don't have VBox data with me to tell you exactly what the acceleration is like, but the acceleration feels crisp, it feels quick. The mid-range delivery is really good. You can be in third and fourth gear for most of your traffic commutes, and you'll still be able to pull quick overtakes when you need to. Even at triple-digit speeds, the torque delivery is actually quite good. So that torquey nature of the original 223cc engine, that is very nicely carried over even in this new engine. So if you are looking for a good sports touring package, this might still deliver. It's just the size that keeps going against it.
The throttle response is crisp, but I would have liked a lighter clutch effort. A 6-speed gearbox with a slip and assist clutch is definitely a plus though. We couldn't push the bike beyond 120 km an hour, speedo indicated, given the road conditions, but the engine felt like it would do more. It doesn't feel as refined as the Gixxer 250 SF, but the vibrations are felt only beyond 8000 RPM. So even in terms of the performance, sport touring and sport riding should be a rewarding experience on this compact 200cc motorcycle. That said, it doesn't wow me the way the original Karizma did back in the day. Probably that is because of the amount of options that are available in the market at the moment. With the compact dimensions of this new XMR also comes a compact 11-litre tank, and with my fuel economy estimates, I think a 350 to 360 km range should be easily doable on this motorcycle, which isn't too bad. The high compression engine could be sensitive to bad fuel, but otherwise, a fuel-efficient liquid-cooled engine like this one should provide an excellent platform for touring. I won't be surprised if Hero actually churns out a more relaxed touring machine on this platform, just like the original Karizma. In fact, they definitely should. A Karizma XMT maybe? Fingers crossed. To sum it up though, maybe for someone like me who has a rich love story with the original Karizma, the new one feels like a completely different breed of motorcycle. It simply isn't the thrilling sports tourer that the original was. In today's times, I would have liked the Karizma to be at least 250cc, but ideally a 400. But that would also push it into a more premium and less versatile category. Most people who will walk into the Hero dealerships right now may not have any preconceived expectations from the Karizma nameplate. They would most likely draw comparisons with the likes of the Yamaha R15 and the Gixxer 250 SF instead. And from that perspective, the new Karizma XMR is definitely a winner. It has enough tech and standout features, oomph in the styling and punch in its motor to make it an all-rounder for the target audience. And after all, an all-rounder is what a Karizma should be. And the XMR delivers on that promise.